Is the brand new Arrma Kraton V6 actually better than the EXB V2 for less money? Stay tuned, because we're gonna find out. First of all, this new clipless body looks absolutely gorgeous. I love these new colors that Arrma's coming out with. They're really imaginative and don't look like anything else on the market. On the outside, you can see we have an updated front bumper, clipless body system roof skids, a nice beefy rear wing, and D-Boots Copperhead 2 tires. We're gonna take a closer look at everything under the hood in just a second, but first, let's take a closer look at this body. To take this off, we have a hidden latch in the front and another one in the rear. Underneath that is a fairly complex release system that we first saw on the V4 3S cars. When you push the latch in, it pushes these wires back. They pivot on this central fulcrum here, which pushes the wires out of the holes that the pins go in. So far, I've had pretty good luck with this system. It can be a little awkward to push, and I did have some slight issues with jamming on the 3S systems. We'll have to see if we have those same problems here when we go bashing. In the middle, we have a new central brace that ties into the center differential tower-to-tower brace, and that connects directly to these roof skids, which should make this pretty strong in upside-down crashes. Other than those changes, the body does look and feel fairly similar. Under the hood, however, is where things have really changed, and this thing is almost fully EXB spec. We've got a two-piece tower-to-tower brace, an updated differential, updated chassis to tower braces, and a whole lot more. I would say the most obvious and striking change from the previous versions is this 7075 aluminum chassis. This is full EXB spec, and I'm surprised to see it on here. We also have a nice steel skid plate in the back and the EXB spec front bumper. It's obvious Arrma has done a lot of work to update this platform, and I'm really excited to check out the changes, but if you want to see this thing taken to the ultimate extreme, make sure you get subscribed, because we've got some serious upgrades coming for this truck, and they're coming soon. One thing that hasn't changed are these tires. These are the same D-Boots Copperhead 2 that we've seen on the last few versions, including the EXB V2. These tires are vented, the wheels themselves aren't. Venting the tires is the best way to keep moisture and debris out, while still allowing air to escape, letting the foams do their job. Now that being said, what's behind those tires looks very different. Not only is this front pillow ball hub a completely new design, but the rear is updated as well. The rear upper link has been updated to the EXB spec, as have the links for the sway bars. The dog bone also appears to be the same, but the hub itself has definitely changed. First of all, we no longer have the spacers in the front and rear. That means you're not going to be able to adjust the wheelbase anymore, but I don't think anybody cares about that anyway, and this makes it a lot more convenient to take apart and reassemble. But most importantly, we have a much larger bearing in the rear here. The previous version used a pretty thin bearing, and this thing has been beefed up quite a bit. That should make it a lot more durable. But like I said, it's this front hub that's changed the most. First of all, gone is the aluminum single shear plate that's always connected the tie rod to the front knuckle. And now we have an integrated double shear connection that should be stronger. This steering link's also the upgraded EXB V2 style that has a lot more beef on the ends. But more importantly, gone are the threaded pillow ball retainers that we've had since the Kraton was brand new. We now have these non-adjustable plastic inserts, which means you're probably not gonna be able to change the amount of slack in the pillow balls, but it also means those adjusters probably aren't gonna fall out. These pillow balls do look identical to the previous version, so I don't think anything's updated here. We do still have the washer on the top. And then as you can see, we do have a big chunky bearing here in the front as well. The stock adjustment on these pillow balls has a little bit more slack than I'd like to see, but for bashing, it's probably fine. And overall, these knuckles do look pretty stout. We'll just have to see how they handle some serious bashing though later in the video. Wrapping that up, we have the exact same spacer on this bottom arm, and the upper and lower arms appear to be exactly the same as the previous version. The rear arm also appears to be the same. One thing that definitely isn't the same as the previous RTR version are these shocks. We do get the updated upper shock mount that we first saw on the V2, but more importantly, it appears we're also getting the V2 EXB upper shock caps. Let's take a closer look at those because they're very different from the previous version. Every previous RTR Kraton has had bladder-style shock caps. These are emulsion-style shock caps. So instead of having a bladder in the top, they have an O-ring and then a bleeder screw. The rest of the shock does appear the same, though we do get these nice black shock bodies. Now, the advantage of an emulsion-style shock is that when you hit a hard landing from a big jump, you don't have that bladder in there that acts as a spring. Instead, you've actually just got a little bit of extra air that ends up getting mixed up in the fluid, and it creates a little bit less bounce rebound than you would get on a bladder style shock. A lot of these emulsion style shocks have an O-ring up here. These actually have a copper gasket, which is pretty cool. I did notice they put a bunch of thread locker on here though that I don't remember seeing on the V2 EXB, so maybe these were backing out. These are really easy to bleed. All you have to do is make sure the shock is mostly filled up, push it all the way up with the bleeding screw out, put the bleeding screw back in, and you're done. You don't have have to really worry about getting every bit of air out of these because they're designed to have a little bit of air in them. In the front of the car, it looks like we now have the standard EXB spec front bumper, and that includes an integrated front skid plate along with some much nicer mounting than the original bumper had. One of the things that doesn't appear to be upgraded is this front upper hinge mount. It still uses the same threaded hinge pin as the previous version RTR. This is something that tends to back out over time, and this is something we'll at least be trying to upgrade. The front shock tower appears to be similar, if not identical to the previous version. The only main difference is this new body mount system. It appears as though it uses the same holes as the previous system. Again, we'll just have to see if that's the case when we go to upgrade them. In the rear, we have the same updated wing mount that integrates with the new rear body mount, and we have the new EXB shock caps. The rear also integrates that new steel skid plate that we don't even get on the EXB V2. Here we can get a better look at that rear body mount, and it actually integrates nuts instead of relying on the plastic for mounting. That should make this a lot less likely to get ripped off. And if you haven't seen it on the EXB V2, here's a closer look at that updated wing mount. It's definitely a lot stronger, though some people do still break them. That also gives us a better look at the updated two-piece tower-to-tower brace. This looks identical to what you get on the EXB V2. One difference is the tower-to-chassis brace is plastic instead of aluminum. However, it is still attached to the chassis with one extra screw. Whereas we don't get the aluminum bulkheads from the EXB, these are updated and have been beefed up quite a bit. And more importantly, we do get the EXB spec front and rear differentials. These include the updated output cups and are fluid filled, but are not set up as limited slip. They just have spacers where the limited slip plates would go. This is the same for the front and for the rear. Okay guys, let me get all this put back together because believe it or not, we're not even close to being done looking at the changes that Arrma has made to this new V6 truck. Moving toward the center, you can see we have new side pods with taller shielding in the front, which should hopefully help prevent dirt from getting into the chassis. But we've got something even better here. Whereas this battery tray looks identical to the previous version, this battery strap absolutely is not. Compared to the previous version, this battery strap feels like an absolute tank, and I'll be very surprised if we break this thing. You can see this is what the previous version looked like. This is a lot better. Flipping around to the other side, the electronics look the same, but there's a subtle difference here. This motor, heatsink, and fan look very, very similar, but whereas this ESC is the same hardware, they've updated the software, and Arrma claims this ESC is now class leading. That's a bold claim, and I think the Castle Cobra 8 might have something to say about that claim. We're gonna find out about that. Interestingly, Arrma says that we can also update our old ESCs to the new firmware and make them just as good. I'll show you how to do that in a few minutes as well. Because the cage is now part of the body, we don't need to worry about removing it before taking off the cover for the center differential. That's a nice upgrade. And that means we just have to remove 6 screws and then we can get this center differential out of here. The center differential is also EXB spec, but unlike the front and rear, I think it's limited slip. Pulling off this spur gear, we can see that yes, this is a limited slip differential. It's got the LSD plates in it. That's nice for the center differential as it allows you to have thinner fluid and better decoupling between the front and rear for shock protection, but shouldn't have nearly as much ballooning as an open differential. We're also getting the faster, more powerful S665 servo with a 25-tooth servo horn, and more importantly, we get the updated servo saver. This servo saver is a massive improvement from the previous version. It has a dual spring design and is much, much stronger than the previous version was. So not only will it work better with the stock servo, but it's going to have a lot better compatibility with upgraded servos. An interesting thing I first noticed with the EXB V2 is they use rubber gummies for the servo, and I suspect this is to help protect this servo from this servo saver, which is way more powerful than the first one was and probably puts a lot more stress on this servo. The motor mount appears to be the same, though we do have the updated screws, which work a lot better than the previous version and generally don't strip. We do have a very bold 16-tooth pinion on here straight out of the box though. And on the manual, Arrma's claiming a real 65 miles an hour. I'm guessing that real is a jab at another company that might not be quite as honest about their speeds. They do say that this thing could do 80 plus miles an hour though. And given that we don't get a speed pinion, I'm guessing that 65 miles an hour is with the stock pinion. What we do get are some really nice tools though. We get a couple of molded grip drivers, a big wheel wrench, a smaller 4-way wrench, and a little Allen wrench. I'm guessing all of these put together are everything you need to work on this truck, which is really nice to see. One thing that hasn't changed is the radio. We still have the SLT3 transmitter. This is a fine transmitter. I do see the orange button on here that on other vehicles has signified the dynamic stability control, but I don't think we have that on here. We'll just have to see once we get it fired up. With that, we have the same SLT compatible receiver. However, this can be switched into DSM-R mode for use with higher end radios. And then wrapping up the changes, I noticed we now have a clamping screw to hold these wires in and a bigger screw for the power button. While I'm putting the center differential back together, if you noticed any other changes that I missed, let me know down in the comments because there's a lot going on here and I might not have caught everything. So obviously Arrma has done an incredible amount of work to the new V6 Kraton, but have they made it better than the V2 EXB? Let's go find out. We've got a fresh 6S battery loaded up. Let's check that steering performance. That feels really good. Plenty of speed, plenty of power, and that new servo saver really helps. I do want to see whether or not this has stability control, so let's turn it on the transmitter and then check it on the car. Okay, so it doesn't seem to have stability control, but let's see if it can do that 65 miles an hour. Definitely feels good. See if we can get to full throttle here. She wants to wheelie. I don't think we're gonna get 65 off-road. That's almost full throttle. Yeah, she really wants to wheelie. Let's try one more pass. I think it's about as good as we're gonna do. Let's bring it in. All right, 57 miles an hour. That's not terrible off-road, and I bet we could get 65 miles an hour in ideal conditions, but it really does want a wheelie. Let's see how well this thing bashes. Over 55 miles an hour off-road, standing backflips in grass, double backflips, and some of the highest jumps I've ever seen off that small ramp. This thing definitely has some serious strengths. The new firmware has definitely added some spiciness to this ESC, and I know you guys are going to want to update your older ESCs to the new firmware. Let me show you how that's done. First of all, you're going to need a Spectrum Smart ESC Programmer V2. Unfortunately, the Hobbywing programmers won't work. You need this box. You'll need the cable to go along with it, and you'll need a USB-C cable to go into your Windows computer. Go to the Spectrum Spectrum webpage for that programming box, click on this link, then click on this link in the document that opens. It's going to let you download the Spectrum Link software. There's no installer for this software, so you just open it up, extract everything to a folder, go to that folder, and then open the Spectrum USB Link app. Once you've done that, you want to connect your programmer to your computer, select the programmer dropdown, update the firmware for the programmer. This one's already up to date as of the latest available software. Then you just need to plug the programmer into the fan port on your ESC and give your ESC power. Once you've done that, select the ESC in the software, go to firmware, select the latest firmware and update it. As of the time of recording, the latest firmware isn't yet available, but hopefully it'll be available by the time these cards are released. When it does become available, you may need to go to those links again and download the latest version of the software. All right, guys, I've got a freshly charged 6S SMC battery. Let's drop this thing in here and see what this new Kraton's really made of. Okay guys, we've got a lot to talk about with this new V6 Kraton, but before we do, I need to fix a little bit of false advertising. There we go, that's better because I didn't have to fix anything on this car, and that's in spite of really trying to break it a few times. I'm not sure what secret sauce they put in this back end, but I've always had problems with these rear arms breaking, and just this entire area where they attach to the chassis being fairly weak. But in the case of the V6, in spite of bouncing this thing off the arms multiple times from pretty high up, nothing broke. Now that's not to say nothing will break, these are the same arms as they were before, unless of course they changed the plastic formulation and didn't tell us. So I do expect these arms in the rear and in the front to be the things that break if something breaks. That being said, in spite of a bunch of really bad landings, the chassis is still perfectly flat. This nice sacrificial rear skid took a bunch of damage, so the chassis itself didn't have to. The front skid also did its job. The electronics are awesome, plenty of power from the motor, ESC, servo, and servo saver. This motor did get pretty warm, but it never overheated. I think this 16-tooth pinion is a fantastic choice. I was a little concerned about it to begin with, but it seems to work really, really well. These new plastic bulkheads gave me no trouble whatsoever. However, the body mounts were a bit of a different story. The posts are a close fit in the holes, and when you get dirt in there, it doesn't usually prevent you from putting the body on, but sometimes it can make the body a little ornery to take back off again. As you can see, it's kind of stuck in the front, though it never gets truly completely stuck, and a little bit of wiggling does take it off. As you can see, in a couple of hard landings, we did punch through the body with the top shock mounts. That's a pretty normal thing, though it would be cool to see them put some sort of reinforcement there so it didn't happen. Wing and wing mount are fine. I didn't take too many hard landings on the wing though. It still can break with a really bad hit. These new front knuckles performed flawlessly, no binding, no breakage. I love them. Same thing with the rear hubs. No issues with any of the chassis braces or tower to tower braces. Center differential worked just fine. And overall, guys, this is a really, really good package. But is this a better overall package than the more expensive EXB V2? I think in some ways, yes. You're giving up the aluminum bulkheads, the 7075 towers, the 7075 tower to chassis braces, and a few other small things, but you're gaining a lot. Clipless body, the new style hubs and knuckles, a better battery strap, and a bunch of other small details, while at the same time you're getting just about everything that's important that comes on the EXB, including the chassis. And you're getting all of that for $100 less than the EXB. This thing's $599, which is a little bit more expensive than the previous version, but given everything that's updated on it, I think that's fair. And honestly, this might be the best 1/8 scale basher you can buy right now. If this is something you're thinking about buying, I say just go ahead and pick one up. Most of the parts in here are known quantities. There are a few things we won't know the long-term durability of until we have longer term, but so far I'm really, really happy with it. I'm really, really happy you joined me, and I'd be really, really happy if you subscribed and checked out this video.